Yo guys, welcome back to another video. This is going to be the OP8 tier list for the West, with Red Purple Law banned and NES lobby gone from Lucci, all the way up until the 8.5 meta with the new starter decks that are coming out. So this is just OP08. We're not talking about what happens after that because things do get shaken up quite a bit. But yeah, I'm just gonna give you guys my thoughts and opinions, make some predictions, and see what the meta might look like. As always, these are just my thoughts, just my opinions, so please take everything with a grain of salt. But without any further ado, let's just jump in and let's get started. Alright, so to me it's fun to look at the previous list that we were talking about before, see what changes we would make, and see where we were right, see kind of where we were wrong. This was the OP 7.5 tier list that I made. Talking mostly, this was very geared towards like what you can bring to Nats, because I felt that was probably proper at the time. I may have forgotten to add this Luffy in there, but I believe I made this list before he got popular. So ignore everything towards the bottom, but just looking at these top three lists, I think this is pretty spot on. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe we saw less Moria, but these were kind of like potential things that you could bring. And as you can see, I mean, Black Yellow Luffy being the best leader in the format, like, is not surprising for anyone. I think everything else, I think this not that it's like was hard to predict, but I think this is pretty concisely what everyone was feeling the meta was looking like. But I do think it's a little bit different. It's not much different. I don't think it's very much different going into just the full OP08 meta. But let's start anew. Let's start fresh and anew, and let's take a look. And I guess this Sanji's not in here yet. Sorry about that. All right, let's start just from the top. So I know this deck, I'll put him in tier 2. I might move him up, or I'll put him in tier 1.5 for now, just because it's a black deck that's really good. I do personally just think Lucci is better, and I know people like Luffy because he can be more consistent and has slightly better matchups into certain leaders and stuff like that. But I just do, at the end of the day, I think Lucci's a little bit better. So we're gonna just put Lucci up there at the tier 1. He's definitely a tier 1 deck still, if not the top 2, obviously. But let's just go in order here. I think Whitebeard's probably going to Spice Copium for me. Rebecca, I'm gonna throw Rebecca Bow and put her in tier 3, just because I do think Rebecca is like Vegapunk, where like on paper it's one of the best leaders in the game, and they have so many tools, and if you're an amazing pilot and you can make it work, she can be so strong, but just doesn't end up doing very well most of the time. And it's a hard deck to choose to bring to a regional, so shout out if you've ever brought it to like a big tournament or anything. Moria, I think we can go tier 2 here. It's just it's funny that we have this, right? It's like, wow, black decks that can use Moria are good. That's wow, wouldn't you know? I think he's got the consistency that Lucci doesn't, but I just don't know if he has the power. I don't know if just being able to go wide more and being able to recoup your Morias out of trash and everything is strong enough to put him above even starter deck Luffy at this point, because I think starter deck Luffy has the plus 1k on leader and just the +1 cost to your characters going for him that makes him a little bit stronger than Moria. Dofi, I think, is still just kind of in tier 2 land for now. Obviously things are going to change. I don't think you could put him in tier 1.5 just because I think he probably just loses most of the time to all these black leaders, so I don't think we can put him any higher. Enel I'm going to put in tier 2 for now. I don't know. He's still strong, obviously, but I think with Luffy getting more popular in the West, it just kind of makes life even harder for Enel. I'm not gonna lie. It's a similar situation with Bonnie, which we'll talk about in a second, but for now we'll put him in tier 2 because obviously just a generically strong leader. Pluffy, I think we'll put at tier 3. I do think Pluffy does have a little bit of staying power in the fact that he can sometimes kind of stand up to black, can handle Enel. If you high roll your board spread hard enough and Lucci can't find all of his pieces, you can beat Lucci. You can even take on like Black Yellow Luffy and stuff like that, especially if you're running Magellan and have again, just can spread your board wide enough and get some of your big bodies on the board, like 9 cost Kaido and stuff if you're running that. Katakuri, I think we'll keep him in tier 3. This tier 3 is a very loose kind of like the very end of competitive spectrum for me, where it's not too crazy if you saw this at a regional or something. So that's kind of just to give you like a bearing on what I'm thinking here. And then Spice Copium is just like, maybe if the pilot is just freaking amazing, they can kind of make it work, right? But let's see. And you can also consider this like 8.5 waiting room if it has cards that are going to come out that are going to help it. Vegapunk, I think, okay, just like Rebecca, honestly, I mean, has good matchups into like almost all of these top tier leaders. Can beat Lucci, can beat Luffy. Enel can be tricky. Enel is a hard one, but it can beat Enel. Beats Dofi, beats Moria. Moria I think is a little bit trickier than Lucci because they can go wider. Loses a Katakuri pretty hard. And stuff like Luffy is actually a little bit hard for it too. But if we're just looking at the more meta decks, it actually is really good. If Vegapunk was easier to play and maybe had more stuff going for it, I could easily put him in like tier 2, even for the OP8 format. But I just think it's one of those unfortunate things where it's like, on paper, it seems amazing, but just doesn't end up being that great. And it's just very hard, It's the Rebecca problem. It's the Rebecca conundrum. It's very hard to pilot these leaders and not only do that, but to bring it to a regional where you're doing so many rounds and playing so many games. It's just very hard. Perona, Perona's still kind of a sleeper for me, but I would put her like at the very top of tier 3 for the moment. I think Perona has a lot of tools, but just being 4 life and having some flaws, and where like a harder matchup into Lucci is kind of difficult. Another one that like requires a really good pilot and a lot of training, which not everybody's always willing to put in. So for now, just tier 3. All right, Yamato. You guys know I love Yamato, my favorite leader. I think I can put Yamato in tier 2 for here, just because I do actually think until 8.5, if you want me to be completely honest, from 8.5, I think Yamato would probably be like at the bottom end of like tier 3, where still competitive, you can bring it and you could win like a treasure cup and stuff, but you're probably not going to win a regional with Yamato in 8.5. Let's just be honest. Like with Dofi being essentially the best deck in format, and 8.5 Dofi just being a complete menace to Yamato, I think it's really hard. But I do think Yamato has a good matchup into some of the other top tier leaders. Sky Aggro in general can beat Lucci. I'd say it's about a 50-50 matchup. Can beat Luffy. Has an easier time into Luffy, in my opinion, in my own testing. Can beat Black Yellow Luffy, which, spoiler, I think is still the best deck in the format. Struggles into Bonnie though, so that's a little unfortunate, but has a decent time into like essentially all the tier 1 and tier 1.5 leaders outside of maybe like 1 or 2. And Yamato can beat Nami. Has like a 50-50 or slightly favored matchup into Nami. So actually has a decent position. If I were in the West and I knew like what 8.5 was actually going to look like, and if I were a Yamato player, I would be playing Yamato. I would be like just trying to get one last hurrah in with Yamato, because I think after 8.5 and once OP9 hits, the black ruling the world kind of thing switches a little bit. It's not as domineering anymore. So yeah, I do think Yamato is actually in a decent spot, and actually kind of a sleeper pick for the 8.0 meta with Log On and NES Lobby band. Black Yellow Luffy, we're just gonna put him up here at the top. He's the best. I think you guys could see. Shout out to Jackson for winning the nationals, or sorry, the regional in Dallas, Texas. It was cool because that's my hometown, so that was a cool tournament to kind of follow and watch. I'm glad that Jackson won it, and we had some good people going to Japan to represent America. And good luck to everyone else who is going to like the Florida regional or whatever, and like the last spots that are left. I'm not exactly sure how many are going to be coming to Japan, but for all the people who are coming to Japan, I'll see you there. Hopefully I'll be able to be at the Worlds tournament and see you guys if you're coming. But yeah, Black Yellow Luffy, just there's not much to say. He's really, really good, and having Lucci essentially being the second best deck in the format, and him just destroying Lucci most of the time, even if Lucci techs for Black Yellow Luffy, Luffy's winning that, like, I don't know, probably 60-70%. At the very highest top level, maybe it's 60-40. that might even be generous, even just saying that. So I've heard people say that Luffy, Stardeck Luffy has a, well, Stardeck 14 mono black Luffy has a better matchup into black yellow, but to me it's just not there. There's no comparison. I think black yellow Luffy beats just essentially most of the top tier decks, and then can get beat by some weird rogue decks, but is just very good and has enough going for it. It's just the best deck. Let's just leave it at that. Bonnie, I think, is actually up here in tier 1 in 8.0. You can make this argument that she could be in like tier 1.5 just because these two bullies right here, it is really hard. I'm not gonna lie, especially because in the West, people immediately started teching stuff like 6-cost Brook and Finger Gun and just running 4 Ice Age because they had you know, we had lobby over here in OP8 in Japan, and it was hopeless with stage. Bonnie was like kind of here because Red Purple Law was difficult and Lucci was like not even unfavored. It was like nearly impossible. But with stage gone, it's so much easier. It's so much better for Bonnie. Like, and even in OP09, Bonnie has like a 50-50 matchup into Lucci, just because Lucci has the problem where it struggles with its inconsistencies, right? Everyone knows that. Everyone's talked about it. But Lucci also has a problem where he can't tech for too many different things at the same time without becoming even more inconsistent and just losing power that way. So when you see Dofi become the best deck in format soon, you're gonna see that people are gonna have to choose, like if you're playing Lucci, you're gonna have to choose what to tech for. Obviously, if the deck to beat is the best deck in format and you can just tech for that, you're going to. But then if you tech for something like Doflamingo, then Bonnie has a better shot, because sometimes the cards and the ratios that you want to run for a certain leader don't stay advantageous towards other matchups. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. So just know that Lucci does have a problem where he can be spread too thin trying to tech for too many different things, where he's not as efficient in handling certain matchups. So, but for now, I think it's pretty rough. But just because I think Bonnie has a really good matchup into Black Yellow Luffy, that alone kind of just immediately puts her between 1 and 1.5. So if you wanted to, like, really, I could put Bonnie right here. I'm not gonna lie, but I think I'm just gonna keep Bonnie here at tier 1. I don't think you need Zoro. I don't think you need 9-cost Zoro to beat Luffy. Especially now you have Carrot and 5-cost Bonnie. Like, you don't even need Carrot. All you need is 5-cost Bonnie and 10-cost Doflamingo. But because Carrot, 5-cost Carrot really helps with some of the other kind of like Rogue and Swarm decks, I just think she has a decent enough matchup into all these. Yes, these two decks are probably her worst matchups, but I mean, it is what it is. And if you learn the matchup, if you practice it enough, and if you tech for it enough, like, I think you can tech for the mono black matchup and still beat Black Yellow Luffy pretty handedly, which in my opinion puts Bonnie up in tier 1 just for this OP8 meta. I do think things change soon, but she's just generically really strong. Let's keep moving though. Reiju, I think Reiju, just because of her results and her performance in the West, I'm gonna have to put her at 1.5. I do think, and yeah, until 8.5 this is probably fine. I do think in 8.5 it's like Dofi is just so much better at it that it's just kind of like Reiju's not as valid. Reiju's not as powerful and not as present. But I mean, getting second at the regional the other day and topping multiple times, I think that's fair enough. Dragon, I mean, he can go. Sorry, he should be out of here. Let me just double check this real quick. Smoker is 8.5 waiting list. Foxy, I'll give you the bone. Oh, Uta's out until OP9, really. You just see. Okay, I think this is right. Kalgara. Kalgara is kind of spicy. I'll put him at like the end of tier 2. I think he's actually decent. Unfortunately, he struggles into the black matchups. It's kind of like Bonnie. It's weirdly like Bonnie, where just in their matchups. But Kalgara doesn't have this, like, Kalgara I think loses pretty hard to Black Yellow Luffy. Unless you maybe just like god tier high roll them and aggro them down, which can happen for sure, but it's not like something like Bella Betty where you can kind of like take care of that. And speaking of Bella Betty, sorry, you're out. You're in the waiting list until OP09, buddy. Ace 2, sorry. Hancock, I think, could be a tier 3 kind of sleeper leader. Nami, I'm gonna put here. Nami's in this weird place where she essentially has a good matchup into all of these. I don't think like, okay, I think she's favored against Bonnie. I think she's fairly, almost heavily favored against Lucci. Luffy probably has a little bit better matchup. Reiju can probably cause Nami trouble. I do think Black Yellow Luffy it's not that favored for Nami, probably just slightly favored. And as long as the Luffy play, like as long as these tier 1 players have practiced the matchup, except for these two, they're gonna need a little bit of luck. Like if you're not running Zoro and Bonnie, you need to find your Hodies. To me, Hodie is more important than Zoro, even against Nami. 9K Zoro does not win you the game against Nami. It can. It's very strong, but I think you kind of need both. If you're running both, you might need to see Zoro and Hodie. But if you see two Hodies, you know you can win. You stand a shot against Nami as Bonnie. It's still difficult. Lucci is just really hard. Luffy, I think it's winnable. But Nami's in this weird spot where she does well into almost every deck. You think like, well, why don't we just put her up there? And I think it's because it does rely on RNG a bit. You do need a little bit of luck. Because you just run so many triggers that will help you finish out the game, that I don't think it's consistent enough to actually be considered tier 1. And to be piloted at the highest level actually does require a good amount of skill. Even though I do think the skill ceiling of Nami is going down over time, which is unfortunate because I think she used to be a leader that had a lot more skill expression and just like was harder to win with, just to be honest. So now I think it's a little bit easier just because of all the triggers and the events and the combos that you can do. Not to take anything away from Nami players, I still like Nami. She's my favorite Straw Hat. Bandai, give us a new Nami leader, please. Because I just unfortunately don't enjoy the leader as much anymore as I used to. Zoro, we'll probably put him here, tier 2, I think. Decent. Zoro just kind of loses to Bonnie, Lucci, and Luffy. So I guess you can beat Luffy, right, if you aggro him down enough. You lose to Enel. You lose to Stardeck Luffy. Reiju's probably like a 50-50. I do think you can beat Nami, though, Zoro, so that's kind of nice. Red Purple Luffy, you're in the waiting room. Ace, okay. Ace, I do want to just give like a special shout out here because in OP8 over here in the East, Ace had like a very special spot where he could beat Lucci and Red Purple Law, but he just really struggles into Black Yellow Luffy. Ace has an incredibly rough matchup into Black Yellow Luffy. Otherwise, and Bonnie's kind of hard too. Otherwise, I would put him maybe in tier 2. Just because he, like, Flame Emperoring Jack is one of the best feelings in all of One Piece card game. If you have a lot of Luccis at your locals, I implore you to try out Red Ace and see how it goes. Especially when the new starter deck comes out that gives you the new 5-cost Ace. So he's kind of in the waiting room, but you know what? I'm gonna throw my boy a bone. Pudding, I think, could go probably like here. Nah, I'll put Pudding here. I think the potential strength of Pudding is very strong, but I think she just is not consistent enough to be any higher than tier 2. I do think she could probably be right here, but I'm gonna put her at tier 2 just because I don't think she's really that good. Red Green Law, I mean, we'll just put you here. Uta, sorry, some of these are for later. Foxy, we'll just give him the cheeky little nah, let's do this. The Spice Copium column here, I think is fine. Let me just double check, make sure I'm not missing anything. Sometimes I forget a leader. I'm sorry, guys. I apologize. But I think this is gonna be it. All right, guys, this is it. This is the final list. I think Black Yellow Luffy is just the best in the format. Lucci and Bonnie have a kind of space behind him. Nami is the dark horse top of the meta, in my opinion. I don't have that high of a regard for the Stardeck Luffy, Stardeck 14 Luffy, but I think his showing in, you know, Europe and everything, and now he's become more popular in the West, I think is undeniably pretty strong, so I'm going to put him in 1.5. Again, with Reiju as well, a leader that I don't actually personally regard that high, but because of the showing and the ability of some people to pilot her, I'm going to put her in 1.5. And then everything else, you know, take with a grain of salt, and they might be there because I just think they have a certain strength into certain matchups of the tier 1 1.5. Tier 2 and 3 are leaders that I think you could bring to a regional that have decent matchups into 1, 2, or more of the top 1 and 1.5 leaders. But that's it. Let me know what you think. Am I completely wrong? I don't think there's a lot of space to actually like argue too much here. I think it's pretty solidified what at least like the top 6 or 7 leaders are. But yeah, let me know what you think about it. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, all that jazz. Check out the Discord, check out the other YouTube channels on my, or the YouTube videos on my channel. And as always, just thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.